Hi, I'm Smithtown Town Councilman Kevin Malloy. You're watching Historic Smithtown. Enjoy the program.
Hi, I'm Patrick Google, an intern from Smithtown Government Television. Welcome to another edition of Historic Smithtown. Today, I'm standing at the Franklin Arthur Farmhouse, one of the oldest surviving farmhouses in the village of the Branch. Join me on a journey to look back at Smithtown's past and see what life was like not too long ago.
The Franklin Arthur House is a unique house for a number of reasons. First of all, it's on its original site. That's so very important. And it predates most of the other homes around it. We're not sure when it was built. We think it was built sometime around 1730. We know the Arthur family owned the land in this immediate area. William Arthur, who was the patriarch of the Arthur family in Smithtown. You always hear about the Smiths in Smithtown. You rarely hear of the Arthur family. The Arthur family settled in this area of Smithtown and were large landowners. We think that William Arthur had the house built for his son, Thomas Arthur, and then it passed down through the Arthur family in successive generations. Eventually passed out of the control of the Arthur family, and it's only later in the 1800s when Franklin Arthur, a grandson of William Arthur, repurchases the house and reestablishes the Arthur family on the site. He actually shared the land with his brother, who had a house further to the west. His name was Erastus. So we had Erastus and Franklin living side by side on the property. And the interesting thing about these two fellows is that they were both blacksmiths, and they made actually fine tools. And the result was they made a good living as blacksmiths. Their shop was said to have been between the two houses, between the Franklin Arthur house and the Erastus Arthur house. The Historical Society today has a garage on the property that we've converted into a blacksmith shop. When we bring kids through the program, we actually show them the blacksmith shop as well. The interesting thing about Franklin Arthur is that I suppose he had a midlife crisis at some point and got tired of doing just plain blacksmithing. And Franklin was fascinated by the art of dentistry. And he decided then and there that he was going to become a dentist. So he gathered all the materials he could find about becoming a dentist. He studied the implements of the time and decided to make his own. So he made his own dental tools, and he learned the dental trade. It is said that he became so skilled that he was known as an esteemed dental surgeon. I just have this vision of him operating on his patients in the back room of the house, and I often wonder what they gave them to numb the pain when he did his dental operations. I suspect that they gave him a good shot of whiskey, but even so, the pain must have been excessive. I always tell kids when they go through this house and they get to the dental office that if they're real quiet and they listen very closely, they can still hear the screams of Dr. Franklin's patients. Modern descendant of the Arthur family and of the Smith family and of the Lawrence family was a man named Embry Rockwell. It's very interesting because he grew up here on this property as a young boy. He was steeped in the knowledge and history of the area. It was his grandmother who always said that this property should be preserved for all time, for people to see what it was like in the past. And that was her dream, and she passed it on to Embry, who always wanted that to happen in the town of Smithtown. He could do it by giving an acre of land, the house, and the barns to the town, But he really wanted more. He wanted the acreage that went with it to be transmitted to the generations to come. He sought for ways to do that, and ultimately we found them. It was his vision, though, to always have these open fields and to let kids know what an agrarian way of life was like in the past. And it was his grandmother's wish that that be done, his wish that it be done, and we were just very lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. One of the interesting things about the Franklin Arthur House is that in addition to being a very old house on its original location, is the fact that much of the surrounding terrain and property is still open. There aren't a lot of houses on the Historic Society property. We have 20 acres of ground around it. And it's much like it was when the Arthurs knew it as a farmhouse. There's a horse barn out there, there's a carriage barn at right angles to it. Both of those buildings date way back into 1700s, and probably the oldest of the two is the carriage barn, which is the smaller of the two barns. And we're pretty sure that one was built before the American Revolution. And today it's used for storing a good many things that the Historical Society has no other place to put. And so they are in the attic of the barn, for instance. That was probably the attic of the barn would have been used to store hay. There are some barn doors that open up and you could bring the hay directly into the attic. Below, there were a number of wings put onto that barn, and I assume that those wings were used for things like a chicken coop, perhaps stalls for the cows, and a number of other purposes that you needed those storage areas for. The main portion of the barn opens up, the doors open up so that you could pull a carriage in and store your carriages in there. And probably there were horse stalls in there initially. Later on, the carriage barn, as it's called, became the automobile garage for later generations who had a different kind of mechanical power. The cow barn probably dates from the early 1800s, the earliest, oldest portions of that barn. You will see that the barn have very large barn doors that open up, and apparently it's an English barn, at least the core of the big barn was. You can still see the hand-hewn beams that are pegged together and held together. There are a lot of tools that are associated with farming and with the blacksmith work that the Arthurs did. And I guess the most interesting thing in there is to take a look at some of the tools of the past and speculate about how they were used, because some of them we frankly don't know anymore. We don't use them. The entire second floor of that barn is interesting because that's where the hay was all kept, was on the second tier of that barn. There is an old contraption. It's like forks, huge metal forks that come together and can be dropped down on top of a wagon load of hay, and those teeth and the tines mesh and pull all the hay up at once, and then it was on a pulley and a track, and it could travel down the length of the barn and then be opened and the hay dropped into the loft. And it was a very interesting process of getting hay from the field into the wagon and from the wagon into the loft, but that's the way they did it. The barns, it's almost like a little time capsule in so many ways, especially because raising animals in those barns gives some continuity to the area. We have sheep grazing on the property here, and right in the middle of downtown suburban Smithtown with traffic roaring all around, it's startling to see sheep in the back munching on grass rather placidly. That's one of the things that really make it unique. And for kids to come see this site, or for anybody to come see this site, it's like a journey immediately into the past. And if you can get away from the roar of traffic along Middle Country Road and walk into the property, suddenly you've kind of been transported back in time. And that's what's so important about this site. The Historical Society uses the Franklin Arthur Farm and the surrounding property and the barns to teach kids about the day in the life of a colonial farmer. The thing that is interesting today is that anything that we need to live, you can go into a store and buy it off the shelf. What we want kids to discover is that in the colonial period, everything that they consumed was grown and raised by their own hands and then had to be processed to be edible and put on the table. And a lot of that they gain from this program.
We focus mainly on the production of clothing here at the Franklin Arthur Farmhouse. We talk about how flax was raised by the people who lived on Long Island to make linen, how children and adults were involved in the process. We also go extensively into how yarn was made from wool, from the flocks of sheep that everybody had. And we also make some clay toys for the children to take home with them. There's a painting on the wall here of what the Rockwell barn looked like during the time that we're talking about, and the flock of sheep that were here then. The sheep that we have at the barn are used to provide this program with the wool that we use for the children to learn how to make yarn. Children are involved in pretty much every production step of making yarn, except for the washing and dyeing, which I do before I get here, and then I give them the samples. But they have to card it, which involves using hand carded. That combs the fleece and prepares it for spinning. And then we show them several demonstrations of spinning. We also spin for them on the spinning wheel. During the summer, we do teach spinning as part of our summer program. And again, we use the fleece from the sheep outside. I think it's extremely important for them to develop an appreciation of how hard life was back then, how you didn't waste things, you know. You needed everything that could be eaten was eaten. And I think it's just as important for the parents who accompany the children to the trips to also realize, wow, you know, things are so different. We have things so easy to our access during this time, and so that they can share with their children that appreciation. This is such a resource to the community. It is so valuable to have this space for people to come. People come here all the time and say, I never knew this was here. And they're so grateful to just have a spot away from the road. They come here to sit and look at the sheep. They'll bring a lawn chair and sit and watch the sheep. It's so restful. The fact that this exists at all is really kind of miraculous considering how much development there's going on around us. But it is so important to have this in our life. It's like, you know, having Central Park in the middle of New York City. You know, it just refreshes the green, the wildlife that we have here, which is coming back. It preserves a continuity. It's not just we're here today and when we go, we're gone. We are part of what has come before us and what will come. And that's the part that this plays in the lives of the people who come here, I think, is the continuity.
Thank you for joining me on this segment of Historic Smithtown. We hope you enjoyed our visit at the Franklin Arthur Farmhouse and Barns. Until next time, I'm Patrick Google. See you soon.